Every business owner has lived this, a system that suddenly stops working, a process that breaks at the worst possible moment, or a tool that everyone swears is simple until it isn't. Technology is supposed to make businesses easier, but when it's not aligned with people and processes, it can feel like the complete opposite. This is part one of our five-part series on technology, where we break down the fundamentals in plain language and help leaders finally make sense of systems running their business. I'm joined today by Chad Cook, a seasoned technology leader with deep experience in operations, engineering, and building systems that actually work for the people who use them. Chad, thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me. Nice to be here. Appreciate the time.
Chad, those examples I mentioned, systems failing, process breaking, tools not doing what they promised, they're incredibly common. From your perspective, where do businesses most often misunderstand how technology actually works inside their company?
Sure. Yeah, I think with technology in general, right, there's an element of looking at it as a utility, and there's an element of looking at it as a strategic element within the organization on the whole. And so you have sort of the block and tackle utility functions of, core components and things like that. But really where rubber meets the road is the alignment of that technology with the business and what the business needs are. And each business is a little different in what it does need. So it takes a little bit of effort and engagement on both the parts of the technology folks and the business folks to work together to make sure that the technology is there in the context of the business to bring the most value.
Yeah, I get that for sure. It's not as simple as buying something off the shelf and just plugging it in and walking away, although most people would, prefer that be the case. And a lot of the owners that I talk to feel overwhelmed because they think they need to speak tech to make good decisions. Can you break down in plain language the core components of a business technology environment, the people, the process, the systems, and how they all fit together?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the way that I think about the roles, right? You have people that are technology workers, people who work on either code or infrastructure and these types of things, and they're managing some of those things that balance the line of utility with also the bigger picture of stuff. And then as you start to step out of those specific functions, you need bridgers, people who can talk to both sides, and not that there are sides in a business necessarily, but understand the business, understand how it functions, get a handle on the day in the life, the operational elements, what goes on with each group and how those departments work. And then being able to translate that into the business requirements that meet the technical requirements. And with that, you start to peel all of these layers, right? So you have sort of pure business function of what each group does and how you can bring technology to bear to help make them more efficient or automate things, but then also looking at the bigger picture of how does this fit into the operational model of the organization. What are its availability requirements? How sensitive is it with data and information and performance? And then starting to break these down into really deeply technical things that, as you think of it, spanning out over an infrastructure and a set of applications, all those things start to meet the needs and then align much better.
It's interesting. And when it doesn't go well, you've obviously worked with companies where the tech was failing, but the root cause wasn't the technology. Can you share a short story where understanding the human side of technology, communication, roles, expectations completely changed the outcome?
Sure. Yeah. So one of the organizations that I helped, and this has been kind of a common thread, and I think what attracts me most to this intersection of people and technology is that it's often an element of discussion and engagement, right? So one of the places that I helped, it had some large enterprise application initiatives to move to new systems on the accounting side. This happened to be a financial firm, so it was looking to move to a new order management system and other trading related technology. And I guess prior to my arrival, they had spent a number of years trying to get this thing moving and not having much success. And so when I first came in, the first thing that I do is I start talking to everybody and really every group, every team member, and try to understand the different perspectives of, what is it that people need? And then by listening to each of their needs and listening to how they think things have gone, then I can sort of overlay those with one another and understand the gaps between what people said or thought they needed and what the tech people heard and what that meant, right? And so in that regard, the gaps were really understanding and knowing how to ask the right questions about what it is. So a lot of non-technical people will come to tech folks with a very concrete idea of what it is they're looking for. But in my experience, what I found is that this tends to be kind of an analog. They're pointing at something that's closest to what they want to do without having the technical background to really specify it. So the job of a technology person, at least in how I carry myself, is really I break it into three parts. One is the craft, which is understanding technology at a deep level, bits and bytes and wires and cables and applications and all those protocols and things, right? And understanding that deeply, so that's your toolbox. Then there's the element of support. So people who rely on technology but aren't technologists themselves, they need it in their daily life. They have deadlines, they have reports to produce or whatnot. And when that stuff stops working, they get very stressed and anxious. And our job is to come to them, to be supportive, to show compassion in how we work with them, and to give them confidence that we can help and we are actually there to help. And then the final piece of these three elements is really as a partner. And what that means is I'm going to sit down with each person and understand the actual daily life that they operate in. What does the business mean? What is their role in the business? How does that relate to the other parts of the business? So that I can kind of have all these puzzle pieces. Then when it comes time to actually needing something done, I can ask the right questions, right? So if you're a non-tech person with some need and you point at some, application that you saw on the web that does something, I say, what about that application is it that you like? What features, what capabilities? And oftentimes it might be one or two of those things, but the other stuff is really peripheral and not what their focal point is. So my job is then to listen to them carefully, listen to how they talk about things, where their sensitivities, their priorities are, and how they think about operating. And then to say, okay, well, you really are looking for a solution that does these 5 things instead of those. And is that correct? Yes. And then, okay, now we have something that we can build upon, and I can translate that with the technology folks. So in this particular organization, spending a few years trying to get off of old products onto new products, it's a paradigm shift. The new products operate in a different way. How people think about them when they were building it is different from the old way of operating. So being able to put yourself into the mindset of the technology to say, this is how it approaches those same problems in a new way, and then translate that into something operationally actionable for the organization, that starts to bridge the gap that then makes it something where you can organize the priorities, you can outline what needs to happen, and then in what order, and then execute on it.
Yeah, I love all of that. I mean, when I think of real world application and being an owner in a tech company myself, it almost sounds like something that you should be training sales teams for, because going into companies and selling technology, there's often a disconnect. And one of the biggest pain points for new technology going into an organization is costly change orders. And what happens is, it's that lack of understanding how to communicate the problems that are in the organization to the tech company, and they get an idea, they think of what they're solving, and they start down that path and invest time and money, and then they get halfway down and start asking more questions, or people start questioning some of the things that are being done and realize that there's something that they missed, and so now they need a change order and they need to go in a different direction. Whereas if we can have someone who communicates between the technology and the organization, and understanding what the people need as deliverables in the organization, then it would eliminate a lot of those change orders, a lot of those friction points, and make the experience much more enjoyable for both sides of the equation. So I really get that. That's cool. I just don't know how to. I just don't know how to take you and make copies and inject you in every sales organization with technology out there. For the business owners that are watching who don't have a technical background, what early along the same lines, what early warning signs should they look for that their technology is misaligned with their business before it becomes a crisis?
Yeah, I think that that's a good place to start, right? In the sense of if the technology is falling down, if it's not meeting the, the operational needs or the availability needs, that's the first sign. It's not working for people, right? And so one of the symptoms that I've often seen in these types of organizations is that the folks that are using the technology have, myriad complaints about what it does or doesn't do, or how it's not, either working the way that it's supposed to or working at all, right? So those are sort of the first hints of something's on fire, right? And the other element of this, I think, is also that mindset of engagement, right? Technology exists in the context of the business, right? So our jobs, depending on where we are in the organization, but those of us in the role as I do it, is to really put myself in that seat of understanding and engaging with the team, right? So this comes back to that aspect of looking at it as utility versus a strategic investment in the firm. And so that engagement model is really important. Having those conversations with people to ask the questions and to establish that partnership with them is really critical, because I want them to come to me and feel like we're just having conversations continuously about their use of technology. So it's not a utility, a one and done, I'm going to go buy a appliance and put it in and then now everything works, but it's sort of a long-standing living thing, right? And that's the other element of thinking about technology and internal to an organization, or whether you're building a product, is to also think about that full life cycle, right? So technology is never really done. And even though people may want one particular thing now, as they get used to using it, then they start asking for more features and other things like that. So if we think like a product and say, we're not just going to build in this blue sky model of just the functions they've asked for, but also to think about long-term support, right? So from a business perspective, they're going to ask for new features. Once they start using it and they like it, then they want more and more and more. So when you come back on the technical side, how you design the product, how you think about the software and the application, how you maintain it, how you add new features, all of those things go into the technical architecture to make it easy to do that. And so part of it is to engage the business owner or the stakeholders or the departments or whoever it may be, the users, and say, we're here in the long haul. We're going to work together on this thing over years, right? It's not just one thing. We'll obviously deliver it in a very streamlined way to get something moving and get it to them so they can start to use it and see the benefits, but recognition that it is a living thing over time. Like people always joke in tech and we say it's never done, right? And so if we have that mindset of it not being ever done, but functions will be done, components will be done, but there'll be more. So having that dialogue, keeping abreast of what's going on with the business and making that a very concrete touch point of just checking in and saying, what is it that you need? How's everything working for you? Do you see anything new on the horizon that you might want? And then when you come back and work with the technology teams on the other end of it, when you're building these things, it's really to describe it in a way to say, we want a long-term architecture around this, not a one-off bespoke application that just does these functions, but think a little bit bigger, right? Think about object models and data and extensibility and modularity within the code, so that when someone asks for something, it's easier to encode it and make it work.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's probably one of the biggest pain points we see, or complaints we see about technology that comes out. Someone will produce something that's valuable, but they don't build in the ability for it to flex or change, or to add additional features, or it's a huge cost point. And then, at the same time, building something custom for your organization can also be extremely expensive. And at the speed of technology today, by the time it's completed, or is it already outdated and you're looking for more features and and solutions that the technology provides for your organization. So that's where I find there is, and not to go off topic, but with Deck Decisionware, the platform that I'm a part owner in, we have the ability to build things with Lego blocks. So yeah, we can build 90% complete, and then we can go off in different directions with it to help solve problems. And once we're in the organization, or actually once we're providing a solution, if you come back with changes that are needed, it's not starting from scratch and building a new system. It's just simple to use those Lego blocks and build out in different directions from the original intent. But it's hard to find that in the industry, and so
I think it's a smart approach, right? And that's the ideal case, is to have that modularity, right? But I think a lot of companies also contend with speed of delivery, right? And maybe part of it is also not understanding at the depth of the impacts of these choices when you build software, right? So software requires some technical complexity. It requires some understanding of the technical components, the libraries, the languages, the infrastructures around these things. And so it may sound good to get something out really fast, but to me, it's sort of like kicking the can down the road, because if we envision and ask that question, do you envision this having any changes whatsoever in the future? And most people will say yes in a lot of cases, but often you'll hear, no, right now I just want it to do this. But that right now is really to say, but in the future it will do something different, right? So that's one of the symptoms that tech people often will, kind of skate over, is when it says right now, and then they focus on delivery. So time to delivery means, in some ways, not so much cutting corners or making it bad. It might be a great application, but if we spent a little extra time to say, okay, what structure can I put around this to make it modular, like those bricks, right? And say, in the future, I have to expect that my customer, my user, my group, or whatever, is going to ask for something new. How do I make it so that that level of effort isn't tremendous when they do ask for that? So I always, I anticipate that they're going to want more, because if I'm building good technology, then I want them to come to me with more, right? So that's part of that partnership. I want to keep building new things that are going to be beneficial for them. So in that approach, it's really, never a case where we don't think about what are we adding on. And this is where we get into that aspect of, you've heard the term bolt-on before. That sort of has a negative connotation in the tech space, because it implies that what was originally built is not easily extensible, and you're just like jamming it on, right? So there's a little bit extra upfront cost when you're designing software. Maybe that pushes your delivery date out. Maybe they wanted it in a month, it takes 2 or 3 months, but having a sound foundation, that in the future, it means that when they go to add new things, it's going to be much more efficient. So in the long term, you end up in a much better situation, just spending a little extra time in the front to design these things properly.
Yeah, I agree, and there's so much more to consider than just solving a problem. It's now with load. Does it, is it still fast, or does it start to lag and bog down? Does it have stability, or does does the operating system, is it going to start to crash as you add load to it? Is there inherent security built into it, so that you don't have to worry about the security side of it? So technology has become quite complex in many ways, where you have to think multi-level on how it serves you and the challenges that come from it. On the flip side, what are the simplest, most practical steps a business owner can take to get their technology working with their team instead of against their team, in your mind?
Yeah, I think in my experience with this, a lot of it comes down to actually capturing, again, what I call the day in the life, right? Like what is it that you do on a daily basis, those operational processes, those approaches, the things that a lot of us just do from memory, because we've been doing them for so long, right? Capturing those workflows, that's one of the biggest helps to actually elicit the details needed to go make things better, right? Because when we do things, this is something that I often do with team members. I'll ask them to explain to me in words. Well, what is it that this thing does, right? Or teach it to me. Because when you're doing something from memory, there's a lot of like fine-grained details that we just do on autopilot and they just happen, right? And that happens in every aspect of the business. If your daily job involves, looking at these data points and producing these reports and checking these numbers and all these things, a lot of that stuff you scan, you look at it, just from looking at it from a pattern that it looks right. So therefore you don't have to, you know what you're doing in your brain, but actually taking the time to say, how would I instruct someone who has no idea how this thing works, how to do that? That's going to force you to peel that onion at a level where, it just happens automatically in your brain machine at that point. But being able to say, oh, wow, like I actually have 20 rules that I'm looking at, but because I've done it so long, it's just a pattern recognition at this point. So capturing those 20 rules, that's the part that the code needs in order to actually do it for you.
Yeah, that makes sense. And, it really applies in many things in life. Like once you do something, it becomes second nature to you. You're not giving it any thought anymore. So to step back and think of it from, okay, if I had to explain this to someone, really makes you rethink what you're doing. And often that's where innovation comes from, is stepping back and looking at it from a different angle or viewpoint, and considering other people's needs and understanding capabilities. So, Chad, excellent insights. Thank you very much for joining me today. This conversation sets the stage for the rest of the series that we have planned.
I'm looking forward to it. Thank you so much for your time, and appreciate everybody who's watching or listening.
This has been part 1 of our 5-part series on technology. If you want to learn more, please reach out. This episode was sponsored by Hyperion Business Solutions. If you're interested in building better systems, solving business problems, and making your business not only more profitable, but easier to run, then follow us or reach out for a free conversation.